I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal here, talking to Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman of the U.S. military. And he is an expert on battlefield combat, perhaps the world's leading expert on the physical and psychological aspects of that combat. And I'd like to start talking about, asking you about what are the, just in terms of people who are new to combat, what are the physical symptoms and the perceptual distortions that are common in soldiers on the battlefield?
Well, first, kind of putting this under the umbrella of the Hamas atrocities.
Yes.
It's really, really important to note that atrocities are not combat. By their very definition, your victim can't fight back. And it's the slaughter of helpless victims. And so the physiological responses are completely different. If somebody's shooting back, we get tunnel vision, maybe the most universal response. We get auditory exclusion. Most hunters know that you pull the trigger, when you're hunting, you don't hear the shot. How could we have had 500 years of gunpowder combat and not let people know it? Every hunter knows the shots get muted. We've got slow motion time. I've had hundreds of people tell me they can see the bullet in combat. They get kind of like you ever shot a tracer at night or even during the day, you can kind of track the tracer, go down range. Well, people are able to do that with their bullets. We get the slow motion time. We get memory gaps. We get memory distortions. All of these are products of a life and death incident. But in my book on killing, I talk about atrocity as a totally different dynamic, and recognize the fact that atrocity is completely different, and it represents this profound, close interpersonal denial of the humanity of another human being.
So tell me about atrocity then, in terms of the physical response on people who commit atrocities.
Yeah.
What is generally their physiology, I guess,
Sure.
while committing those acts? What's going through their
again,
mind and body?
Right. I point you to my book on combat or on killing.
Yeah.
What we just covered is in my book on combat.
Okay.
But in my book on killing, we can go in detail. Just by the way, both books were fast forwarded for translation to Ukrainian. And my publisher tells me the U.S. Embassy's bought 1,000 copies to distribute to the Ukrainian troops. Both my books are translated now in a total of 9 languages. I actually have 14 published books, but those are the 2 that we focus on right now. And when we talk about the atrocity, the first thing to understand is it is a powerful, powerful dynamic that entraps and empowers individuals. The Nazis are the classic example. There was no surrender for the Nazis. And once they had committed these evil acts, they knew that they were no longer to be accepted in a normal life. They were empowered by their atrocities. They were bound together with one another by the shared atrocity, but there was no surrender. Hitler had to fight to the death. It only ended when he died. When you entrap people with atrocity, you get this dynamic in which they are completely entrapped into your organization. They no longer be part of normal life. They have now separated themselves from the rules that society uses to separate. They've committed these evil acts, and so they're bound together as a unit, and they're bound to their leaders. And they cannot surrender. And so it enables them and empowers them to fight to the end. It enables close bonding with one another, but it also entraps them because there is no surrender. There is no escape. Homicides in America and Canada have exploded in recent years. And homicides are actually held down by medical technology. It's much worse than it looks.
Yes.
But a lot of my cops say, well, it's gangbangers killing gangbangers. But once a gang member has committed a murder, they're entrapped. They can no longer be a part of normal society. If they're convicted of their crime, the rest of their life will be in jail. Maybe they'll even be executed for their crime. So when we look at this empowering an atrocity, I tell my cops the same dynamic is happening in here. So what's going on in the mind of a human being committing an atrocity? Well, first and foremost is the power of a leader. We saw Milgram's study that just somebody standing there with a clipboard was able to have people flip the switches, creating ever greater shocks that ultimately would kill this individual.
Yes.
That the obedience demanding leaders. And then we've got the diffusion of responsibility with a group. Single individuals seldom kill. The hard thing to explain is not that 1 in a million terrible crime. The hard thing to explain is that 99.999% of our citizens who will never kill anybody. Divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic accidents, a lifetime of provocation. Well less than 1 in 1,000 citizens will even seriously attempt to take a life. Explain that. So in order to overcome all of this sociological, psychological, physiological dynamics, there has to be an array of processes. And first is the leader, and second is a group. And it's often said that man is not a killer, but the mob is. And we know about mob killings and this hysteria when the whole group is pumped up. The third factor is this distance, psychological distance between the killer and the victim. And with Hamas, the Nazis were products of decades of anti-Semitism, that the Jews are not human. And Hamas has embraced that same kind of dynamic. These are the evil oppressors, and they're not human. They deserve to be raped. They deserve to be killed. Their children deserve to be killed. And decades of this anti-Semitism, decades of this, an entire generation has grown up in Palestine, immersed in this mindset that these are the evil oppressors. They deserve to be killed. And the anti-Semitism dynamics are very powerful. So you got the three dynamics. You've got the leader demanding the killing. You've got the group absolving the killing. And then the distance, psychological, emotional distance between the killer and the victim, and the nature of the victim. And the final ingredient is a predisposing within the mind of the individual killer. And these people have been hand selected and handcrafted to be the elite core. They're very like within the Nazis had the SS. Not everybody committed atrocities, but the Nazis hand selected the SS as individuals that were predisposed to commit these crimes. You could probably make a pretty good guess that a lot of the people who were unleashed on the October 7th atrocities, these were hand-selected individuals who had previously engaged in violent behavior, had been used as enforcers, had committed violent acts, had a profound desire to commit violent acts. So we got the predisposing factor of the individual, and there's a chart in my book that's got all these laid out. We've got the distance between the killer and the victim. And then we've got the leader demanding this behavior and the absolution of the group dynamics. And this is what empowers atrocity. This is what pulls people across the bounds of normal behavior. Normal people don't behead children. Normal people don't commit rape. Normal people don't murder helpless individuals. How do you make that step from being a normal person to committing these horrendous acts? And there's an array of factors that have been used by organizations like the Nazis to empower and entrap people in atrocities.
In the history of warfare, which is a lengthy history, as long as civilization, how common is it for groups of soldiers and warriors to go into atrocity mode as opposed to just normal kind of combat mode? Is it unusual, or is it fairly common throughout human history?
Well, and again, it's a circumstance. When you're besieging cities, the tradition was that if there was a gap in the wall wide enough for a man on horseback to go through, the city surrendered. And if they didn't surrender, if they fought to the end, then what happened was this weird dynamic. Now, there is a process in human beings of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And one is fight or flight, but after fight or flight, there's a backlash to feed and breed. And rape as and pillage and looting of a city was very, very common. It was extraordinarily difficult to control your soldiers after they had broken through the walls. They're no longer in danger. The enemy's been defeated. And then comes the raping and the pillaging and the burning and the looting. And so, again, it depends on the circumstance. An army against an army, one side surrenders. There's this dynamic of mutual respect. But a walled city and the walls of the city fall, your friend just died and that friend just died, and finally we're through, and there is no longer a threat, and you backlash from sympathetic to parasympathetic. You backlash from fight or flight to feed and breed. So again, throughout history, this kind of atrocity dynamic had become the norm in that circumstance. One of the most amazing things in fairly modern history was the British Army under Wellington in the Peninsular Campaign. Wellesley, before he became Wellington, the general, when they were besieging cities, it was unheard of that he was absolutely very, very adamant that there will be no rape, there will be no pillage, there will be no plunder. And this is a new concept. This is a level of discipline that was fundamentally new in human warfare. That what we were going to besiege a city, we're going to take the city, but we don't get a pillage and rape and plunder. That's right. And so initially, and again, Wellington established a level of discipline within the British Army in Portugal and Spain, that if any British soldier committed an atrocity, they would be tried and executed right there on the spot. So you understand that that's really kind of historically the first time in history that we've overcome that and had war the way we think of war to be today. When throughout history it was a totally different critter. After you defeated them, the rape, the pillage, the plunder was almost the norm, and it took an enormous act of discipline to transcend that and bring warfare to a new level, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yes. Is that new level of discipline then been fairly common in 20th century warfare between battles between armies and just around the world commonly? Is it common?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
This kind of discipline, this kind of no atrocity type thing in Western warfare has become, if you will, the norm, but it's always fragile. You know, the My Lai incident in Vietnam is an example of the breakdown. And the U.S. Army, I came in 1974, and the post-Vietnam Army was the first time in human history that an army taught their troops how to disobey orders. Actually taught them the mechanism to disobey an order. Sir, I don't believe that's a lawful order. I want to run that up my chain of command. If the chain of command is not satisfactory, the alternative was a chaplain. We're taught in basic training, if we're given an illegal order, that we're to say, I want to bring that up the chain of command. And if the chain of command is not satisfactory, we go to the chaplain as an alternative mechanism that we were taught. And that's, post-Vietnam, post-My Lai, was the first time in human history any army has ever been taught how to disobey an unlawful order.
There's a video that journalists and politicians are being shown of the atrocities shot by Hamas fighters, generally speaking. Yeah. So people are seeing this. And the remark that we hear from many, many people who have seen this is they can't get over the glee and the joy of the Hamas individuals who are committing these atrocities. What do you make of that glee and joy that's being described?
The Japanese in World War II committed some horrendous acts of atrocity. And there's the book, The Rape of Nanking, and there's an amazing photograph of a ditch. And in this ditch are a bunch of poles, and staked and tied to each pole is a captive Chinese soldier. And one by one, the Japanese soldiers go into the ditch and bayonet this guy to death. And everybody on all of their friends are cheering him, "Banzai, banzai, banzai," and they're turning this into this gleeful action And then that night they had the comfort women, the Chinese women that would be raped. And this dynamic of taking glee in killing a helpless victim, we can see how it's manipulated. But in order to do it, you've got to have this intense dehumanization of your victim. And you've got to have this intense support from your group and possibly your leader. Each of those cells probably had some leader that was demanding this behavior to one degree or another. What the separation was from the killer to the leader, we haven't got a whole lot of information. Was there a cell leader at every level demanding this behavior and cheering people on? You could hypothesize there was, even if it was just a peer leader type individual who rises to the top. But most of all, to get that kind of glee, you've really got to create this hatred of your enemy, this dehumanization, this intense dehumanization. And again, the Japanese early in the war, in the rape of Nanking, and this slaughter of innocents, and the cheering and the gleeful attitude they try to create, that level of glee is comparatively rare in warfare, but it is an act of extreme atrocity enablement, taken to its ultimate point.
One of the things that has been written about is the use of a stimulant by the name of Captagon. I think I might be pronouncing it correctly, probably not, but it's a methamphetamine family drug, which was apparently used by ISIS, is now being produced in the Middle East by Syria. There's widespread use of this drug, and it's been found in the pockets of some of the dead Hamas attackers. So tell me about the use of stimulants, how common that is, and if you know about this particular, what impact this might have in terms of the psychology of these people, and their willingness to commit atrocity.
Yeah. Well, one of the things to understand is that from one level, the pill is just a placebo. This pill is where the pill made me do it. The pill becomes a placebo. But to whatever degree, the pill creates an altered state of reality. To whatever degree, that pill can create within you this sense that this is different. It's not me. This is an altered state of reality. It's almost like a dreamlike dynamic. And again, you can create this with just a placebo, but to whatever degree the pill creates this altered state of reality, then you've got even greater denial of the reality of what I'm doing. These are not real people. This is everything I'm doing right now. It becomes in a semi-dream state. And I know some of the captured Hamas interviewed by the Israelis said they almost couldn't understand what they were doing. One of them said we were animals, the things that we did. Well, to a certain degree, the pill creates that altered state of reality, the group dynamic, the leader dynamic, but in a lifetime of dehumanization, a lifetime of vilifying your victims. But the pill is just that extra little bit that creates this altered state of reality, and the pill could be just a placebo and would have a very large impact all by itself. If it creates any degree of altered state of reality, which it does to a certain degree, millions of people take meth, millions of people take amphetamines. During World War II, we fed amphetamines to our troops, but the Brits, the Americans, Canadians, the Germans, a great deal. I was at the British Staff College as a young major. I went to the British Staff College in Camberley. We went to the bridge too far, Arnhem. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, but, I've seen the movie.
The British Airborne Division had dropped at Arnhem. And we had some of the British soldiers. This is 1983. And we had 93, I'm sorry, it was 1993. And we had British soldiers who were there. And we would interview them. And what was it like? Well, we were here, my friend was here, and we were there, and we were in this little ditch and I said, well, was there any use of medications? They said, hold on for 3 days. Or were they using amphetamines? Oh, yeah. He said, after the first day, the officers pulled out the little packs of little white pills, and we all took amphetamines. But the point is, in those circumstances, the pills didn't create violence. The pills, in the vast, vast majority of the time, didn't create violence. But the pill becomes, number one, a placebo. That's, I'm not really me. I've taken this pill now, and it's not my fault. It's the pill's fault. And number two, to whatever degree the pill makes you feel different, it creates the altered state of reality. There's powerful empowerment in that, which takes it to the next level. So this degree of glee, and you can see that pill, if you will, even if it was a placebo, and if it goes a step further, and you're looking at the world differently, you're feeling differently, they can really empower a new level. And then this business of sitting back and looking at yourself in horror is really pretty normal. If the whole group goes back together, Nazi SS units committed terrible crimes, but they were supporting each other. They were together. It wasn't until they were broken apart and they were held accountable for their actions one by one. Without this distortion of reality created by, your group is your reality. And this group of Nazi soldiers created this reality. What we did is right, what we did is good, what we did is necessary. When they're pulled out of that and they're held accountable for their crimes one by one, there's among those who are actually committing the crime, the banality of evil, if you will, but they look back on themselves with horror. And that's why they can't lose. If they commit these horrible crimes, and if they lose, then this facade has broken down, and they got to be held accountable for their actions. And so, again, you see this dynamic of the individual taken outside of his group, outside of his leader, having to look back on their action and feeling an enormous degree of horror at what they've done. And how the deck is stacked against them. They create this act. As long as they return to Palestine, as long as they're with friends who support and cheer what they did. But when they're pulled out of that is why it is empowering. Atrocity is empowering, but it's entrapment. Because once they're pulled away from their supportive group, then they got to be held accountable. And the response of most human beings is horror. Now, the Nazis who sat back and gave the orders. That's where the phrase banality of evil comes. But those who committed the actual action is kind of different. Again, the Nazis had almost like this machine. One person took all their clothes. You don't have to do anything but take their clothes. And now they're naked. What kind of people don't wear clothes? Animals don't wear clothes. They're no longer human. They're naked. And then they pass them on to the next person, and they're the ones that pack them in the gas chamber. And then this is the one that turns the knob. And everything's broken down. But the atrocities committed here were straightforward, one-on-one, and all of the dehumanizing dynamics where the Nazis would strip them naked and then send them to the next stage. All of that happened in one spot. But it also was a factor of a lifetime of dehumanization, anti-Semitism. And then we see this around the world of people cheering these terrible acts because these are the evil oppressors. And any action by the oppressed to the oppressor is acceptable action until the reality strikes them and they got to be held accountable for their crimes. And then it all comes apart. So around the world, this structure has to be held together. What they did was good. What they did was necessary. The Israelis are evil. The Jews are evil. Killing evil people is a good thing. And before they can accept that around the world, before they can accept that what they did was evil, then they're fighting desperately against that recognition. Because once that happens, then again they've got to look at themselves in horror and understand the magnitude of what they've of the evil action they've committed.
The taking of photographs is relatively last 100 years kind of phenomenon. So what we saw was kind of next level, these GoPro cameras on people as they're committing atrocities and, taking away the hostages that they've seized, that kind of thing. Why do the soldiers take these photos, and how common is this becoming in modern combat / atrocity?
Yeah. This really brings it back. We take photos of everything now. You know,
Yes.
we film everything. We take photos. Anything happens, 20 people got their cameras out taking photos. In a way, these photos bring it to the next level of banality, the banality of evil. I'm taking pictures of these evil acts, and I bring them home and show it to my family,
Yeah.
just like any other action. And if I can take a picture of it, if I can take it home and show it to my family, then obviously it's a good thing. And my family thinks it's a good thing. And that brings us back to that banality of evil, in which these banal acts of taking a picture of everything transcends into this new environment. And you know, we've seen a lot of imagery coming back from the war, various wars around the world, but nothing like this. Nothing like a group of individuals committing mass atrocity and taking videos of it and taking pleasure from it. But it almost brings it at that next level of normalcy. There's nothing bad about what I'm doing. This is another act. We catch it on camera just like any other act. And it brings it to this level of normalcy, if you will.
It sounds like with the entrapment aspect that you're talking about in this, that the leaders of Hamas are profoundly culpable for everything that's happened, but also they have created a group of people now who will desperately fight for their lives to the end, which might have been the goal. So is that how this is going to, it sounds like it's going to play out in a just very difficult action in terms of bringing to justice the perpetrators of the atrocities. It's not going to be anything easy about it.
Right, and absolutely, just so well said. That makes the whole point right there, of the empowerment of atrocity and the entrapment of atrocity, that these individuals will fight to the bitter end. There have been surrenders, of course. There will be surrenders, but the degree of willingness to surrender will go way down. You know, traditionally, units have only had to be whittled down to 70-60% of their strength before they would just give up. The leaders are gone, and 30% of our troops are gone, and we surrender. But many mechanisms can manipulate that. The Japanese were masters of that. The Nazi SS were masters. If you can create a unit which will not surrender under most circumstances, then you have got a greatly enhanced battlefield machine. But you've also, again, you've entrapped yourself in the eyes of the world. Firing artillery, the thing to understand is the difference between atrocity and acts of war. 1 second, please.
Yeah.
Hey. And that's one thing that people have difficulty grasping, that dropping a bomb from 20,000 feet, firing artillery from 2 miles back, any of us, and that's the point I'm making on killing, any of us could see ourselves doing that. We can identify. That's something, everybody did. There were no refusals to fire artillery from 2 miles back. There were no refusals to drop bombs, fire bombs on Hamburg or Dresden. There was no refusal to do that. But as it gets closer and closer, and when it comes to cutting a baby's head off, the 99.999% of people would refuse to do that. And that's the difference between firing missiles and firing bombs and this close range. When you try to empathize with the individual, could I have done that? In that circumstance, would I have done that? And that's where atrocity crosses this horrible line. There's under no circumstance could I ever imagine myself doing that. This is not right. These people have committed crimes. There's all the difference in the world between acts of war against individuals. When you fire that artillery, they're firing back. When you drop those bombs, they're shooting back. There's all the difference between that and close range interpersonal aggression against somebody who represents no threat to you, no harm to you.
In terms of I just want to finish on this, the
Yep.
mobs of people that are cheering Hamas. It's been surprising to me And I'm just wondering, like, did they not see the atrocity videos? Did they not see the broken body of the young woman in the back of the truck, for instance, and the gleeful people? And I just wonder, how could you see that and then go to the rally? And so I don't get it, and I'm just wondering if you've thought about it and what you make of it.
Absolutely. They're in a denial state. If in order to accept that this is evil, then they have to accept that I'm evil. And everything I stand for is evil, and my belief structure is evil. And so people resist that intensely. And many of those individuals are primed for violence at levels never seen before. You say, I'm evil, I'm not evil, and I'll show you. This priming for violence, we've got a whole slice of the world that's been kind of cut off now. That they, to a degree, they've seen it, they know it's there, but they're denying that it's an evil action. And they've this incredible dynamic, that in Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, the people back in the motherland who were making equipment, people working in the factories, people working in the fields, they avidly, staunchly supported the Nazis, and they had to believe what they're doing is right and what they're doing is good. And it took their destruction in World War II. And the videos of the concentration camps, those by themselves weren't sufficient. They had to lose, and the world had to turn around and say what you did was evil. And Germany's response to Nazism, Japan's response to imperial crimes. Japan to this day can't have an army; they've got a self-defense force, and they in their constitution they've stamped themselves today. The idea that a Nazi regalia would mean you could go to jail, and we have trouble with that. But in Germany, that's the situation, that any idealization of the Nazis is punished. So Germany you see this dynamic in which they've got to swing in the opposite direction, but terrible, terrible cost it took to get them there. And the way they were empowered by it before they finally hit the point where they have to admit, yes, this was evil. We were evil. The things we did were evil. We see it in post-war Japan. We see it in post-war Germany. But the process to get them there was a horrendous, destructive, painful process.
So the process in Israel and Gaza will be very difficult.
Yeah. And I would say to you, on 9/11, 3,000 of our citizens were murdered. We invaded and occupied two nations for 20 years. That's war. In Pearl Harbor, it's fascinating to look at Pearl Harbor, because the Japanese killed almost the same amount of people within a few hundred, that like 1,400 people were when the Japanese attacked a military target.
Yeah.
But then it became war, and we firebombed cities. In 2 nights of firebombing Tokyo, we killed over 100,000 people, and we made 1 million homeless, and we nuked 2 cities. That's war. And if you don't want war, don't engage in acts of war against sovereign nations. And I would submit to you that Israel has every right to carry this war out that we had to carry the war to them after we were attacked in Pearl Harbor or after 9/11. And the world is standing back saying that they shouldn't do this, but it's the only viable option in the face of this evil that refuses to acknowledge that their actions are evil. As long as they can continue to perpetrate this belief structure, that the harm that they're empowered to is frightening.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time today to talk to me.
My pleasure.
Thanks again.
My pleasure. Any other time. God bless.
See you later. Bye-bye.